Welcome to week 4 everyone. My name is Instructor Neville and I will be your guest lecturer today. Last week we covered foreign policy from the perspective of the executive branch. Today we shall be looking at international organizations and other transnational actors. There are, generally speaking, three main categories of international organizations other than states. 1. There are international government organizations, or IGOs. These are organizations that are made up of at least 3 different nations. Within these organizations, representatives of the states will meet to discuss a variety of issues. These groups will generally have a permanent leadership and bureaucracies. An example of such an organization would be the United Nations, which we will cover in more detail later. There are now hundreds of such organizations in varying size and area of interest. The second and third categories are transnational actors, who are organizations who work across state lines, but they are not made up of states. The second category is known as transnational corporations, TNCs, or multinational corporations, MNCs. These are companies that have operations in more than one country. There are many thousands of these. You can go to most countries around the world and go to McDonald's. Many of these larger companies have more money than many countries. The third category are called non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. This group is the most broad and therefore the most difficult to nail down. Generally, there are interest groups or charities that have an international mission. A good example would be the Greenpeace or the Red Cross. The Catholic Church would also be considered an NGO. If you would like, there is a longer list of examples of these groups in your textbook. So why do international organizations form in the first place? According to liberalism, states form IGOs because it is in their best interest. Some problems can be solved more easily and possibly more cheaply within them. It also makes cooperation more likely, especially on security issues. Their primary role is to create a forum for discussion. This happens most often in the United Nations. So let us look at the UN in more depth. It was formed after and in response to World War II and the failure of the League of Nations. It is so important because it is the closest thing to an international community, as almost all countries in the world are members. Its main purpose is to promote peace and security, along with the promoting of economic and social collaboration. One of the most important principles of the UN is that all states are equally sovereign. This means that while states within the UN vary greatly, they are all considered equal on the floor. It is made up of 5 principal organs: the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, the International Court of Justice, and the Secretariat. We will now break these down. The Security Council is possibly the most important organ of the UN. It is made up of 15 members, 10 of which are elected from the General Assembly for 2-year terms. The other 5 members are permanent members of the Council. These countries are the United States, Great Britain, France, Russia, and China. These permanent members have the right to veto any vote put forward for the Council. This gives these 5 states enormous power, and it also means that nothing can pass without their approval. The argument could be made that this gives these states too much power, and it means the Security Council is susceptible to deadlock. The Security Council's main mission is to deal with threats to international security. This is because it is made up of the most important states, so are the most capable of doing something about it. As this is the first mission of the UN, it puts a lot of emphasis on the Security Council. It is supposed to act as a deterrent, and as such should rarely have to use force. Now let us turn to the General Assembly. This is a much broader body than the Security Council. It is made up of all 193 members of the UN. All, regardless of size, have one vote. At first glance, it could seem a lot like a domestic legislative branch. While it can pass resolutions, very little of what they vote on is binding, so the main purpose of the General Assembly is for debate and discussion. The ideal is that states can air their problems and come to a peaceful solution. As such, the General Assembly has the right to discuss anything, but its only power is over the budget of the UN. This could be significant, but the budget for the UN is relatively small. It is around $5 billion each year, and it is reliant upon the members' dues of states. Some countries, including the USA, who pay the significant portion, have withheld payments in the past. While it has limited authority or hard power, it can shape debate, help to organize agreements and deals between states. It can be frustratingly slow, as all members are allowed to speak on any given topic.
Let us now turn to the Secretariat. The Secretariat supports the other agencies of the UN. It performs organizational, budgetary, translation, research, and other administrative functions. While it does not have much official power, the 8,900 or so employees of the bureaucracy are employed by the UN and not their home government. This means that they must swear loyalty to the UN. The Secretary General is the head of this organ, and they are often the face of the whole of the UN. They can have considerable influence in the international community, and they have on occasion had significant impact on international incidences. The Economic and Social Council oversees and runs a number of commissions and agencies that deal with economic and social development. While it started out small, as these issues have gained more importance for the UN, so has this council. Finally, we have the International Court of Justice. This court adjudicates over disputes brought before it. It rules mainly on issues over international treaties. It is seen as the final arbitrator over international law. This could be put in a position of authority, but it can only see cases if countries bring them before them. Both sides must agree to the case, and they do not have to obey the ruling if they do not agree with it. Its rulings therefore are more symbolic, and can be used to shame states that go against the international community.
Let's look at one of the most important tools of the UN, and that is peacekeeping. These operations were not laid out in the Charter of the UN, but they have become vital in separating warring sides and in bringing peace and stability to a region. They do as little as fighting as possible, as they will only fight to defend themselves. They have in the past been able to bring about peace talks. They do not, though, control these talks and cannot force a settlement, which has left some frustrated with these peacekeeping forces. Any one mission is relatively small and lightly armed, and so cannot stop sides who are truly determined to fight. An example of this would be Syria today, where the impact of the UN has been limited at best. Another significant issue they face is funding. They are funded outside of the regular budget, and states are often unwilling to contribute, so a lot of missions are often underfunded. Now let us turn to some different views on the UN. The first view is that it is a world government. This can lead to two conclusions. First, there are the optimists who see the potential of the UN to end anarchy and bring about a more peaceful world, while a realist would view the UN as dangerous as it gives a false sense of security and potentially takes sovereignty and power away from states. This could even threaten the survival of states. Another view would be that the UN is irrelevant. With its very limited military, small budget, and needs for states to comply with any decision, the UN could be said that it doesn't matter. It can be a good place for states to talk, but they do not need it, and it has had a limited role in any serious incidences. Finally, a liberal view of it could be that while it is not more powerful than any state, it can be a useful tool for them to achieve their goals peacefully. The UN can be more active in non-military issues. States can compete with each other in the UN without the risk of hostilities breaking out.
We are now going to turn our attention to probably the most expansive organization that can claim to be an international government, that is, the European Union, or EU. It is significant because of the depth of integration for its members. It has been labeled as a picture of what the rest of the world could look like. The evolution has a long process that started out in 1951. The first goal was to promote peace through economic integration. This is still the most important goal of the EU today. The first treaty was the Treaty of Rome, which was signed by 6 countries in 1957. Since then, the EU has grown in number, and the connections between the member states have deepened. Another significant step was the Maastricht Treaty of 1992, which outlined common security and foreign policy as a union. One of the greatest achievements of the EU has been the creation of a single currency. It was introduced in 1992 and replaced members' currencies in 2002. Not all members have to have the currency. For example, Denmark and Sweden do not. The EU has 4 major organs in a similar setup to a domestic government. It has an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. Number 1, the European Commission. This is like the cabinet of the EU. It is made up of commissioners from different countries who head up a ministry. Their explicit mission is to govern fairly. This is critical to the EU's success. Number 2, they have the Council, and number 3, the European Parliament. These 2 act as the upper and lower house of the legislative branch of the EU. The Council is made up of representatives chosen from their home states, and they act specifically in their interest. In order to pass anything, it must go through the Council and the Parliament. The Parliament's members are voted for directly by the citizens of each country. As a result, they can vote more independently. They do not even have to like the EU. Great Britain has recently sent several members who are very hostile to the EU. The Parliament is the weaker of the 2, as its main role is that of consultation. Finally, we have the European Court of Justice. It arbitrates over the EU similarly to the Supreme Court, and unlike the ICJ, it has significantly more authority, making it a stronger court. The EU has been a shining example of what an international organization could be. It has, though, faced significant hurdles in recent years. With the economic crisis in 2008, several within the EU had to be bailed out, including Greece, which has been significant hardship. There has been concern that the EU has grown too quickly and without enough consideration for the strength of its members. Great Britain has recently voted to leave the EU, and it is struggling to deal with the current migrant and refugee crisis. It remains uncertain if this experiment will survive.
Next, we're going to look at transnational actors. There has been an explosion of these since the end of World War II. TNCs, or MNCs, while existing before, have grown significantly since then. They pursue global strategies for production, sales, research, and investment. Some companies like Shell or Coca-Cola are represented in almost every country in the world. Their role and impact, though, is hotly debated. The disagreement is over how they interact with state governments and whether or not they are adding to world economic growth. One argument is that they tend to extract raw materials and labor from countries while pumping the profits back into their home country. They try to use their economic influence to maintain cheap labor and low environmental standards. On the other side, they could be said to be encouraging wider growth in the investment country, and this allows a country to increase their tax base, earning them more money. This has come into question recently, especially with Apple being found by the European Court of Justice to have avoiding paying proper taxes in Europe with the help of Ireland. Another recent argument is that the TNCs are taking jobs and money away from their home country. Now, these arguments could all be explained by the possible idea that these companies don't care about their countries at all. They only care about the bottom line, wherever this can be increased. They are threatening the state focus of international relations. The question becomes, therefore, how much power do TNCs have over other states? With their cash, they can have significant leverage over countries, especially poorer ones. One of the complaints of the 2008 crisis was that the banks were not punished enough, especially in places like Great Britain. This was not done because they threatened to leave and take their business elsewhere, but they do not have a military. There is no court in the world that can force states to do what a TNC wants. TNCs need governments to maintain their countries.
Finally, for this week, we are going to cover non-governmental organizations, NGOs, or transnational advocacy networks, or TNAs. These are groups that organize across national boundaries to pursue a goal often political or social in nature. Greenpeace would be an excellent example. These groups have primarily three main goals. The first is to lobby governments. They act as watchdogs on their issue, making sure that governments are held accountable to their actions and promises. This helps to make up for the lack of accountability in the international system. They have almost no way of forcing a government to do what they want, but they can report their activities and shame them. This can provide motivation for people to take action within their country. An example of this reporting could be of the human rights violations within Syria at the moment. What separates these actions from traditional domestic lobbying is that resources raised in one country are spent in another. The second role of TNAs is to try and set the international agenda. This is an attempt to bring a non-traditional issue to light and make it more important so that it can be solved. An example of this would be international human trafficking. This is very difficult to do, as the issues of security and prestige are what states tend to be more focused on. We have, though, seen more success of this tactic in recent years, especially with the rapid growth of the internet and social media. Their third and final role is possibly the most important. It is to provide a service. Groups like the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders provide vital aid in poorer countries all over the world who are unable to provide the help themselves. This is a remarkable achievement because many states would not be able to provide such a service. These groups can be viewed as unbiased and non-threatening, so they can be allowed into an area where a foreign government would not be allowed. An example of this would be Syria again, where the Red Cross has been providing vital aid. These groups, though, are not without their critics. They can be said to be controlled from their home country and are therefore still biased. Their aid resources could also fall into the wrong hands. They could also become victims of corruptions from the local government. It could also be argued that poorer states can become reliant upon this aid rather than growing their own economies and infrastructure. An example of this would be education in several African nations. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture. Next week we will be covering the use of force, WMDs, and terrorism.